Look in a mirror and focus on your eyes. Brown, blue, green, gray, hazel, maybe amber. We treat those colors like they are paint samples. But here is the weird part. Blue eyes do not actually contain blue pigment. There is no tiny layer of blue dye hiding inside the iris. What you see is partly pigment, partly tissue, and partly light. And that small optical trick opens a much bigger question. Why do human eyes look so different at all? The colored ring around your pupil is the iris, and one of its most important ingredients is melanin. More melanin usually makes an iris look darker and browner. Less melanin allows lighter appearances to emerge. But the iris is not a flat painted surface. Light enters, scatters through the tissue, and comes back toward you. So when an eye looks blue, part of what you are seeing is not a blue substance. You are seeing physics doing a very convincing impression of color. That already makes eye color stranger than it sounds. Then genetics shows up and makes everything messier. You may have learned that brown eyes are dominant, blue eyes are recessive, and a little family chart can predict the result. Useful for a classroom exercise. Not great for real humans. Eye color is polygenic, meaning many genes contribute to the final appearance. Biology, as usual, looked at our neat little boxes and quietly ignored them. Two genetic regions appear again and again in eye color research, OCA2 and HERC2. In many European populations, variants around these genes strongly influence the difference between lighter and darker eyes. One way to picture it is as a pigment control system. OCA2 helps influence melanin biology, while regulatory variation near it can change how strongly that system operates. But this is not one magic blue eye gene. It is one powerful part of a larger genetic network. That larger network is exactly why two people can both be called blue-eyed and still have noticeably different irises. The same goes for brown, hazel, or green. A color label compresses a lot of biology into one convenient word. Different combinations of genes can influence pigment amount, distribution, and iris structure. So eye color is not a genetic barcode with one clean answer. It is more like a final image produced after many small biological settings are adjusted together. For most of history, that would have been the end of the story. Once a person died, the color of the iris disappeared with the soft tissue. Bones do not come with little labels saying brown eyes or gray eyes. Then ancient DNA changed the game. Teeth and bones can sometimes preserve fragments of genetic material. Researchers can recover those fragments, examine pigmentation-related variants, and estimate which traits were more likely in people who lived thousands of years ago. The word estimate matters. Ancient DNA does not hand us a prehistoric selfie. Scientists compare genetic variants with relationships observed in living populations and calculate likely phenotypes. Some predictions are stronger than others. So when you see a reconstruction of an ancient person, the DNA may support certain features, but the finished face is still a reconstruction. Archaeology gives us evidence. Artists give that evidence a face. Those are related things, but they are not the same thing. And once researchers started looking at ancient European genomes, something surprising appeared. Some hunter-gatherer populations carried variants strongly associated with lighter eyes, while other pigmentation markers did not always match the combination we now associate with Northern Europeans. In plain English, light eyes did not automatically arrive with an entire modern European look. Evolution was not installing a complete appearance package. Different traits had different histories. That matters because our brains love to project the present backward. If blue eyes are common in a region today, we instinctively imagine people there thousands of years ago looking roughly the same. Ancient DNA keeps ruining that shortcut. Populations changed. Traits changed in frequency. Combinations that are common today could once have been rare, while combinations that seem unusual now may have been ordinary in particular prehistoric groups. The past did not owe us visual continuity. When researchers compared many ancient hunter-gatherer genomes, Europe looked less like one population and more like a patchwork. Some Western and Northern groups had high frequencies of light eye-associated variants. Several Eastern and Southeastern groups had much lower frequencies. So asking what color were prehistoric European eyes is a bit like asking what the weather is in Europe. Which part? Which time? Which population? One label hides a lot of variation. And those populations did not stay politely in place. Groups split, migrated, expanded, shrank, disappeared, and mixed with newcomers. Farming populations moved into Europe. Later migrations reshaped the genetic landscape again. Every movement carried genes with it. That means eye color variants could become more common in a region not because the local environment suddenly invented them, but because people carrying those variants arrived, survived, mixed, and had children there. This is where population genetics becomes more useful than a simple adaptation story. Imagine a small group founding a new settlement. By chance, they carry certain variants more often than the population they came from. Their descendants inherit that uneven sample. That is a founder effect. Add genetic drift, bottlenecks, migration, and admixture, and frequencies can change dramatically over time. Evolution does not always need a dramatic survival advantage. Sometimes history and probability do plenty of work. Natural selection can matter too, but it is only one player. A variant may become more common because it improves reproductive success, because it is linked to something else under selection, or because demographic history pushed it around. Real populations experience several of these forces at once. That is why one tidy explanation can be so seductive. It turns a messy population story into one arrow on a diagram. Unfortunately, human history has never been famous for staying tidy. The tiddiest explanation says this: humans moved away from the equator, sunlight weakened, and eyes became lighter. It sounds reasonable because skin pigmentation really does have a strong relationship with ultraviolet radiation. So people often borrow that logic for eye color. But the iris has its own genetic history. You cannot simply take the evolutionary explanation for skin, shrink it down, place it inside the eye, and call the problem solved. Greenland gives us a useful reality check. Around 4,000 years ago, a person from the Saqqaq culture lived at an extremely northern latitude. Researchers recovered enough DNA to examine variants in HERC2 and OCA2. The combination was strongly associated with brown eyes in Asian populations. Extremely far north, still genetically consistent with brown eyes. Latitude had apparently forgotten to read the simple version of the story. That does not mean environment never influenced eye color evolution. It means latitude alone cannot explain it. A population does not arrive in a new place as a blank genetic sheet waiting for the climate to fill in the colors. People bring ancestry with them. They bring variants inherited from older populations. Selection can act on what is available, but migration, drift, isolation, and admixture are already shaping the deck. Evolution plays the cards history gives it. The story also refuses to stay inside Northern Europe. Ancient DNA from Chalcolithic communities in the Levant shows substantial variation at an important HERC2 marker associated with lighter eye probability in commonly used prediction models. That does not mean everyone there had blue eyes. The evidence does not support that. What it does tell us is more interesting. Relevant light eye-associated variation existed well outside the region people usually imagine as its natural home. Once you zoom out, Western Eurasia starts looking like a network rather than a collection of isolated boxes. Hunter-gatherers moved. Farming populations expanded. Later groups arrived and mixed again. Variants traveled with all of them. Modern borders came much later. Genes did not stop at customs. So when we ask where an eye color belongs, we are often asking a modern geographic question about populations that lived before those geographic identities existed. This changes the evolutionary story completely. There was no clean sequence where brown eyes came first, then blue, then green, then hazel, like nature was unlocking new colors in a game. Genetic variation appeared, survived, disappeared, spread, mixed, and recombined across generations. Different populations carried different pieces of that variation. The visible result changed as those populations changed. Eye color is not an evolutionary ladder. It is a moving population mosaic. And now we reach the question that causes endless confusion online. How many eye colors are there? 6? 7? 8? One common classification uses brown, blue, green, hazel, amber, and gray. Other lists add very dark eyes as black. Some mention red or violet appearances. Others put heterochromia in the same list. Suddenly, a simple biology question starts looking like a disagreement. But most of the disagreement is actually about classification. Heterochromia, for example, is not an eighth basic eye color. It describes different pigmentation between the two eyes, or different colored regions within one iris. Red or violet appearances are also special cases that can occur when pigmentation is extremely low and light interacts with internal structures differently. So adding these to a list may be useful for describing appearances, but it does not mean evolution created 8 separate eye color systems. The better way to picture eye color is as a spectrum. Brown can range from light to extremely dark. Hazel can contain brown, gold, and green. Gray can sometimes look surprisingly blue depending on lighting. Green can vary dramatically in brightness and tone. Amber has its own warm appearance. Nature did not draw a sharp border and announce, hazel ends here. Green begins now. We drew those borders because categories are convenient. And categories are useful. Doctors need descriptions. Researchers need consistent labels. You need a word when someone asks what color your eyes are. The problem begins when we mistake the label for the biology underneath it. There are not 6 genes for 6 colors. There are not 8 genes for 8 colors. Multiple genes influence a shared pigmentation system, and different combinations can produce overlapping appearances. The labels are the map. The biology is the territory. This also explains why people with the same eye color label can look so different. 2 blue eyes can vary in brightness, grayness, pattern, and contrast. 2 hazel eyes may barely resemble each other. 1 brown iris can look golden in sunlight and almost black indoors. Your eye has not changed species between breakfast and dinner. Lighting, pigment distribution, and iris structure are simply changing what reaches the observer. So why are some eye colors more common in certain populations today? Because modern populations inherited different histories. Some variants became common through ancestry and demographic events. Others may have been affected by selection. Migration repeatedly moved them into new regions. Admixture combined previously separated genetic lineages. Drift changed frequencies by chance. What you see on a modern map is therefore the latest frame of a movie that has been running for thousands of generations. That is why eye color can tell us something about population history without being a personal ancestry scanner. A blue eye does not reveal one exact migration route. A brown eye does not identify one ancient population. Visible traits are influenced by ancestry, but they are only tiny pieces of an enormous genome. Trying to reconstruct someone's entire history from iris color would be like identifying a whole movie from 1 pixel. Interesting pixel. Still just 1 pixel. Ancient DNA is powerful because it gives us earlier frames of that movie. It shows that prehistoric populations did not always look the way modern stereotypes suggest. It shows light-eye-associated variants in places and populations that complicate simple geographic stories. It shows that extreme northern latitude does not automatically mean light eyes. Most of all, it reminds us that populations move far more often than maps make it seem. Now look back in the mirror. The color staring back at you seems incredibly immediate. Feels personal, almost decorative. But the biology behind it is ancient. Melanin shapes the base. Light changes the appearance. Many genes influence the result. And those genes reached you through populations that migrated, mixed, separated, expanded, and survived long before anyone had words like blue, hazel, gray, or amber. So are there 6 eye colors or 8? There is no universal answer until you first decide how finely you want to divide the spectrum. Nature never counted them. We did. The deeper question is why one shared human organ produces so much visible variation. And the answer is not one mutation, one climate, or one migration. It is the accumulated result of genetics moving through populations across deep human time. That may be the strangest thing about eye color. We notice the surface first, but the surface is only the final frame. Behind it are ancient populations, chance events, migration routes, genetic mixing, and thousands of generations passing traits forward without knowing where they would end up. Your eyes do not contain a perfect record of that history, but their color is one small visible consequence of it. A little bit of human evolution hiding in plain sight.